Welcome back, Eleanor Victoria Stories. Her best friend told me at our anniversary party that she only picked me because he was unavailable, and I laughed for about 5 seconds until I noticed my wife didn't say a word to deny it. I'm 33, been married to Anna for 7 years, and her best friend Max has always been around like some permanent fixture. I never questioned. He was at our wedding, at every holiday dinner, knew our Netflix password, had a drawer at our place for his stuff when he crashed after late nights. Everyone called him family, so I did too. Our 7th anniversary party had 40 people crammed into our apartment, and I was playing host while Anna worked the room in this red dress that made her look incredible. Max showed up with expensive champagne, already loud, already touchy with her. In that way, I'd trained myself not to notice. He'd stand too close, whisper things that made her laugh, and I'd feel like the third wheel at my own celebration. Around 10 that night, I went to grab more ice from the kitchen and Max followed me in, leaned against the counter with this smile that didn't reach his eyes. He started telling me how I was just the backup plan, how Anna had wanted him, but he was tied up with someone else back then. I asked what he meant, and he laid out this whole story about how Anna used to be in love with him, how I was the easy option who didn't require any effort, how the timing just wasn't right for them. "She picked you because she needed to prove someone would pick her," he said. And the way he said it so confident, like they discussed this version of events before, made something cold settle in my stomach. The next 2 weeks, I started seeing everything differently. Anna texted Max constantly, had this old shoebox of university photos where he appeared in way too many, let him walk into our place without knocking like he owned it. During movie nights, he'd sit closer to her than I did, take up space on our couch like he belonged there more than me. When I carefully suggested maybe we could see him a bit less, Anna told me I was being controlling, said he was like her brother, accused me of being insecure. She said it like I was the problem, like noticing was worse than what I was noticing. So I backed off and tried something different. I back a little, gave her less attention, less warmth, just to see if she'd notice the distance. She didn't, not for days, and that told me everything I needed to know about where her focus actually was. Max started showing up even more after that. Sunday dinners, random visits on weeknights, joining us for movies on Wednesday like he'd been invited. He'd grab our throw blanket, settle between us on the couch, make himself comfortable in ways that should have bothered her, but somehow never did. I stopped saying anything, just kept a mental list of every boundary he crossed that she didn't enforce. Then, one Thursday, I came home early from work because I forgot files I needed for a morning meeting. 2 cars in the driveway, living room lights on, and when I walked in quiet, I found them on the floor surrounded by old photo albums. Max was talking about some night they remembered, asking if she recalled when they thought they'd actually end up together. Anna laughed. Really laughed. The kind of genuine sound I hadn't heard from her in months when she was with me. "I made a mistake back then. We both know I did," Max said, leaning closer to her. She didn't say no, didn't shut it down, just sat there looking at him like he'd said something profound instead of something that should have ended their friendship on the spot. I stepped into the doorway and said, "I forgot my files." Nothing more. And they jumped apart like teenagers caught doing something they knew was wrong. Max made some excuse about showing Anna old university memories. Anna's face went red, and I just walked past them to my office without another word. 20 minutes later, she knocked on the door and started with that line people always use when they're about to gaslight you, telling me it wasn't what I thought. I just said, "Okay." Didn't argue, didn't demand explanations because I already knew what I'd heard and what I'd seen. That night after Max left, Anna tried to act normal, asked about dinner like nothing happened. But I couldn't stop replaying his words, or her silence, or the way they'd been sitting so close on our floor with our memories spread around them like he had equal claim to our history. I started going through our shared photos that weekend, really looking at them for the first time. Max was in 70% of our couple shots from the last 5 years, always positioned between us or with his arm around her, grinning at the camera like he was part of the package. Our vacation photos, our Christmas cards, our birthday celebrations. He'd inserted himself into every major moment. And I'd just let it happen because Anna said he was important to her. Now I was seeing it different, seeing how he'd slowly moved from the edge of our life to the center of it, how she'd made space for him that should have been mine. I found her old college yearbook buried in the closet and flipped through it, found exactly 3 pictures of them together, always in group shots, never looking particularly close. Whatever story Max was selling about their grand love affair, the evidence didn't match up. That's when I realized he wasn't just crossing boundaries, he was rewriting history, and Anna was either believing it or pretending to believe it because the attention good. I grabbed his stuff from the drawer in our hallway, threw it all in a garbage bag, left it by the door. Anna asked what I was doing, and I told her I was making a decision she should have made years ago. That same night, I told Anna I was going to stay at my brother's place for a few days, that I needed space to think. She panicked immediately, asked me not to go, promised she'd talk to Max about boundaries. I repeated the word back to her, and it absurd given what I'd witnessed. This isn't about boundaries anymore. This is about safety. She looked confused, maybe genuinely didn't understand what I meant, and that scared me more than anything else because it meant she truly couldn't see what Max had become, or what she'd allowed him to become in our marriage. I packed a bag while she followed me around the apartment making promises that empty, saying she'd fix it, saying I was overreacting, saying everything except the one thing I needed to hear, which was that Max was completely out of our lives effective immediately. The next morning, barely 12 hours after I'd arrived at my brother's place, Max sent me a text asking if everything was cool because Anna seemed distant lately. I stared at that message at how quickly he'd noticed a change in her behavior. How closely he must be watching to pick up on shifts within half a day. This wasn't friendship. This was surveillance. And the fact that my wife's emotional temperature mattered that much to another man made me feel sick. I didn't respond, just screenshotted it and started a folder on my phone. This part shows something most people miss. When someone notices your partner's mood changes within 12 hours, that's not friendship, that's obsession. The real question isn't just Max's behavior. It's why Anna never found it strange that her best friend monitored her moods more closely than her own husband did. My brother's wife suggested I talk to someone who actually knew Max before he became this fixture in our lives. Someone who could tell me if this behavior was new or if I'd just been blind to it for 7 years. I started with LinkedIn, searched Max's connections, found his ex-girlfriend from 2 years before he reconnected with Anna. Her name was Rachel, and her profile said she worked in marketing downtown. I sent her a message saying I needed to talk about Max and Anna. Kept it vague. Didn't want to sound crazy. She responded within an hour with just 4 words that made my stomach drop. Finally, someone noticed. We met at a coffee shop near her office the next morning, and she didn't even wait for me to order before she started talking. She told me Max had been obsessed with Anna since college, that their whole friend group knew about it, that Anna had gone on maybe 2 dates with him before realizing something was off and cutting contact. But Max didn't accept that. He started showing up places Anna would be, called her at odd hours, told mutual friends they were meant to be together, even after she'd made it clear they weren't. Rachel described an incident at Anna's dorm, where campus security got involved, where Anna's roommate filed a complaint where the whole thing got messy enough that Anna transferred to finish her degree at a different school. I sat there like the floor had disappeared underneath me, because Anna had never mentioned transferring, never mentioned any of this, and I'd been married to her for 7 years. Rachel out her phone and showed me screenshots she'd kept from when she dated Max. Messages where he talked about Anna like she was his property, like their story wasn't finished just because she'd moved away. He told Rachel that Anna was the one who got away, that he was just killing time until she came back to him. And when Rachel broke up with him, he didn't even seem upset, just said she wasn't Anna anyway. She told me Max had a whole folder on his laptop of photos he'd collected in his social media posts, pictures from mutual friends, screenshots of her tagged locations. Rachel explained she'd had his laptop password when they lived together, got suspicious enough to look through his files before she moved out, found organized folders labeled with Anna's name going back years. When Rachel confronted him about it, he said she was overreacting, that he was just keeping up with an old friend, but she'd seen the way he studied those photos like he was memorizing every detail. Rachel said she'd warned Anna about it back then, sent her a message about Max's continued fixation, but Anna never responded. And then years later, Rachel saw Instagram posts showing Max back in Anna's life like nothing had happened. I asked if she still had any of those files, and she nodded, said she'd kept them because something told her they'd matter eventually. She airdropped me everything right there. Dozens of messages, photos of Max's photo collection, even a video Rachel had secretly recorded of him talking about Anna at a party, drunk enough to be honest about his plans to eventually be with her. I drove back to my brother's place with my hands shaking on the wheel, into the driveway, and just sat there trying to process what I'd learned. My brother came out, saw my face, and called his friend who used to work in private investigation before he switched to corporate security. His name was James, and he came over that evening with a laptop and a legal pad. Asked me to tell him everything in chronological order. We spent 4 hours building a timeline, starting from college and moving through every interaction I could remember. Every time Max showed up unannounced, every holiday he inserted himself into, every photo where he positioned himself between Anna and me. James pointed out patterns I hadn't consciously noticed, how Max's visits increased whenever Anna and I had any kind of conflict, how he always brought gifts that were slightly too personal, how he'd started dressing similar to me in the last 2 years. He's not trying to be with her. He's trying to replace you. Become so embedded that removing him feels impossible, James said. Tapping his pen on a cluster of dates, we mapped out Max's social media posts and found he'd been tagging our location, our favorite restaurants, our vacation spots, building this digital narrative where he was part of our relationship, whether we acknowledged it or not. The next day, I drove back to our apartment because I needed to have this conversation face to face. Needed to see Anna's reaction when I showed her what I'd found. She was in the kitchen when I walked in, looked relieved to see me, started to say something about missing me, but I cut her off. "Did Max threaten you in college?" Her face went completely white, and that told me everything before she even opened her mouth. She tried to minimize it, said it was complicated, that his ex-girlfriend was just bitter and exaggerating, that Max had changed since then. I repeated the word changed like it was absurd, and out my phone to show her the timeline James and I had built. She looked at it like she was seeing a puzzle piece she'd been avoiding, all those visits and messages and coincidences arranged in a pattern that was impossible to deny. I told her Max knew where we were all the time, that he showed up within an hour of us posting anything, that he was monitoring us and she'd been letting him. Anna's hands were shaking when she reached for the phone, tried to explain that she'd thought he was just being a good friend, that she'd sorry for him after his breakup, that she'd never imagined it was this calculated. Rachel sent me more files while Anna and I were still talking. Additional screenshots she'd found in old backups. There were subcategories in Max's collection, one labeled with Anna's name containing hundreds of photos organized by year and event. Screenshots of every comment Anna left on social media, even saved copies of posts she deleted. There were notes, too, observations about what she wore, who she talked to, what time she usually left for work at the insurance company, where she'd been an adjuster for the last 4 years. I showed Anna the folder structure and explained this was a surveillance log, not friendship, that this obsession had been going on since before we even met. She started crying, said she'd broken contact with him after college, specifically because things got weird, but he'd reached out years later, acting normal, apologizing, seeming stable. She believed he'd moved on, thought the past was past, never imagined he'd been watching her the entire time. I asked why she hadn't told me about college, and she said she was embarrassed, thought it made her look naive, didn't want me to think she had poor judgment about people. I pointed out that letting him back into our lives after that was the actual poor judgment. And she nodded, finally understanding what she'd invited back in. Max sent Anna a message around midnight asking if she was okay, because he'd driven past our apartment and seen my car back in the driveway. I showed her the text and pointed out he was driving past our place at midnight, that he was escalating, that this surveillance was getting bolder. Anna stared at that message for a long time before she finally said she needed to cut contact completely, that she'd been wrong to think boundaries would be enough. I told her she needed to be harsh about it. No soft language, no room for interpretation because men like Max heard what they wanted to hear in any ambiguity. We wrote the message together, short and direct, telling him not to contact her anymore, not to come by, that their friendship was over. Anna hesitated before sending it. Said it mean. Mean keeps you safe. I replied, and she finally pressed the button. Max's response came in seconds. A paragraph about how I was controlling her, how he knew she didn't really want this, how he had proof that she still cared about him. Then the call started one after another, 15 and 10 minutes. We let them go to voicemail and listened to them get progressively more unhinged. The last one saying she was his, that I'd stolen her, that he was coming over so they could talk in person. That message made me grab my keys and tell Anna we were leaving, going to a hotel for the night, because I didn't trust what Max might do when he realized she was serious. She was still hesitating, saying, maybe we were overreacting when we heard someone pounding on our door. Here's the critical moment that changes everything. Anna finally understood that being nice to someone obsessed with you isn't kindness. It's fuel for their delusion. Even after seeing the surveillance folders and unhinged voicemails, she still hesitated to be mean. Because society teaches people that setting hard boundaries makes them the bad guy, when really it's the only thing that works with people who refuse to hear soft no's. The pounding got louder, and Max started yelling through the door that he could see the lights on, that he knew we were home, that Anna needed to talk to him without me poisoning her mind. I called the police while Anna stood frozen in the hallway, her phone showing those 17 missed calls in the last 20 minutes. The operator told us to stay inside, keep the door locked, that officers were 7 minutes away. Max kept yelling, his voice getting more desperate, saying he'd been there for Anna when I wasn't, that their connection was real, that I was just threatened by what they had. When the police arrived, he immediately switched personalities, became calm and reasonable, told them there was a misunderstanding, that he was just checking on his best friend who'd sent him a concerning message. The officers separated us, took statements, and one of them me aside to say this looked like harassment, but without a pattern of documented incidents, they could only tell him to leave. They gave us an incident report number and suggested we look into a restraining order if his behavior continued. Max left, but not before staring at our apartment window, and I knew from his expression that he didn't consider this over. That night, we blocked his number on both our phones, changed all our passwords, including Netflix, locked down our social media, and I booked us into a hotel anyway because I couldn't shake that he'd come back. The next morning, we met with a lawyer who specialized in protective orders, brought the timeline James had helped us build, Rachel's screenshots, the incident report from last night, and recordings of Max's voice messages. The lawyer listened to everything, made notes, and told us we had a strong case for a temporary restraining order that could become permanent after a hearing. She explained the process would take about 2 weeks to get the temporary order, that Max would be served with papers, that he'd have a chance to contest it in court about 3 weeks after filing. People like this often escalate when they're officially cut off, document everything, don't engage with him directly, and call the police immediately if he violates the temporary order. We filed the paperwork that afternoon, and the lawyer said Max would be served within 48 hours. That night, Anna couldn't sleep, kept checking the windows even though we'd installed security cameras at our front door and parking area the day before, changed our locks, and told our neighbors and building manager about the situation. Max got served at his workplace 2 days later, and the fallout was immediate. He started sending Anna emails from different accounts, each one more manipulative than the last, saying she was making a mistake, that he had proof she'd let him on, that he'd show everyone the truth about our marriage. Then the fabricated screenshots started appearing, Messages that looked like they were from Anna, saying she loved him, that she was only staying with me out of obligation, that they'd been planning to be together. I showed them to James, who examined the metadata and pointed out they were obviously edited, different fonts, timestamps that didn't match up, messages inserted into threads that didn't exist in the original conversations. James explained how Max had taken real conversations and spliced in fake responses, building a counter-narrative to use in court to make himself look like the victim. We documented every fake screenshot, had James write up a technical analysis showing the manipulation, and sent everything to our lawyer. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks after we filed, and Max showed up looking like he'd lost sleep, playing the part of someone wronged. His lawyer tried to paint him as a longtime family friend who'd been suddenly cut off because I was jealous and controlling, used those fake screenshots as evidence that Anna had encouraged his attention. Our lawyer was ready, presented the timeline going back to college, Rachel's testimony about his obsession, the surveillance folder, the escalating messages, and James's analysis proving the screenshots were fabricated. The judge looked at Max's folder of Anna's photos, organized by year and date, listened to the voice message where he said Anna was his, and asked Max directly why he'd been documenting another man's wife so thoroughly. Max stumbled through an answer about preserving memories of their friendship, but it sounded hollow, even to his own lawyer. This goes beyond friendship. This is obsessive monitoring, and the fabricated evidence suggests you're not grounded in reality about this relationship, the judge said, looking at the evidence spread across her desk. She granted a 3-year restraining order, no contact of any kind, no coming within 500 feet of us, our home, or Anna's workplace. No third-party communication. Max stared at us as we left the courthouse, and I could see he still didn't accept it. Still thought this was temporary, that Anna would come back to him once she saw reason. We went home, and Anna finally broke down, cried in a way she hadn't since this started, said she's stupid for not seeing it sooner, for letting him back in after college, for thinking his obsession had just been a phase. I told her that manipulation works because it's gradual, that Max had spent years normalizing his presence, making her doubt her own instincts, positioning himself as indispensable. We started therapy the following week, both individual sessions for Anna and Ku's counseling for us. Her therapist specialized in helping people who'd been manipulated by long-term psychological abuse, worked with Anna on understanding why she'd minimized Max's behavior, why she'd been afraid to enforce boundaries, why his attention had validating even when part of her knew it was wrong. I had conditions for staying in the marriage, and I made them clear from the start. Anna needed to stay in therapy, work on understanding her part in this, figure out why she'd valued Max's validation more than our relationship's health. We needed complete transparency, her phone and social media open to me until trust rebuilt. No private conversations with mutual friends who might pass information to Max. If you break the restraining order, if you contact him in any way, I'm done, I told her, and she agreed without hesitation. The first few months were hard. Anna had moments where she defended her past choices, where she tried to minimize what had happened, but her therapist kept bringing her back to reality. Slowly, she started seeing the patterns, how Max had exploited her guilt and empathy, how he'd made her responsible for his emotional state, how he positioned himself as the one person who truly understood her while systematically isolating her from recognizing how unhealthy their dynamic had become. We're 8 months past the restraining order now, and life feels different, quieter, like we're finally building something that's just ours. Max violated the order once, showed up at Anna's workplace trying to deliver a letter, and spent a night in jail before his lawyer got him out. The judge extended the restraining order another 2 years, and warned him the next violation would mean serious jail time. Anna quit her adjuster position after that incident, didn't want to risk him knowing her schedule or location. Found a remote position with a different insurance company. We moved to a different neighborhood where Max wouldn't know our routines. Didn't tell mutual friends our new address. Basically started fresh. We still have cameras, still check our surroundings, still save every blocked call or email that manages to get through. But the panic has faded into caution. Anna's therapist says she's made real progress, that she's learning to recognize manipulation patterns, to trust her instincts instead of explaining them away, to understand that kindness without boundaries isn't kindness at all. Our marriage isn't what it was 7 years ago, but maybe that's good. Maybe what we had before was built on ignoring problems instead of solving them. Now we have actual boundaries, real conversations about what we need, and space that belongs only to us, without someone else's shadow filling it. The apartment feels bigger somehow now that it's just the two of us, now that every photo on our wall is actually ours, now that the person sitting next to Anna on the couch is the person who's supposed to be there. The real lesson here is that some people will exploit your kindness as permission to stay in your life long after they should have been gone. And the hardest part isn't recognizing the red flags. It's accepting that years of history don't justify tolerating behavior that makes you unsafe. Documentation saved this situation. Trusting my instincts despite being called controlling saved this situation, and understanding that, but we've been friends forever should never trump. This person is obsessed with my spouse. Save this marriage. Would you have caught the signs earlier, or would you have also dismissed them as overthinking? If your partner hit a dangerous past like Anna did, could you rebuild trust, or would that be the deal breaker?